Africa and the Middle East are seeing some of the most dire immigration crises. From the Syrian refugee crisis, which saw more than 14 million people displaced, to migration in the Sahel and in sub-Saharan Africa and North Africa, these crises are having ripple effects throughout the world. The Think Table is a digital magazine that takes a look at one immigration issue a month in the United States. But because immigration is a global issue, we are doing a 4-part series with the Migration Policy Institute, where we're taking a look at different regions around the world. To dive deeper into Africa and the Middle East's complex immigration landscape, we are sitting down with Andrew Selee of the Migration Policy Institute.
My name is Andrew Selee. I'm the president of the Migration Policy Institute, and we're immensely pleased to be partnering with Immigrant Food on the Think Table, thinking about immigration around the world. The perception is that everyone in Africa wants to get to Europe, right, or the United States, but half the migration in Africa is other countries in Africa. There are big growing economies, South Africa, Nigeria, Senegal, Ivory Coast, Cote d'Ivoire. I mean, there are places that really attract other migrants, either because they have better levels of development, they're a little more stable economically and politically, or they just have large growing economies, right? I mean, Nigeria has a little bit of everything, but it's a big growing economy, complex economy. So there's a lot of migration within Africa. Not everyone wants to leave the continent. Not everyone wants to go that far. Not everyone can go that far, right? Migrating costs money. And costs other sorts of resources to be able to know how to get somewhere else. So I think the first thing to say is there's lots of migration within Africa, and then clearly there's lots of migration elsewhere, mostly to Europe, a little bit to the United States and Canada, and a little bit to Asia, actually. I mean, the Gulf, and then to China, which actually has a small but growing African population as well.
So we know that many people are immigrating because of poverty, economic reasons, right? But what are some other reasons that are causing people to leave?
I mean, the biggest reason people move, everywhere is economic, right? But it really is mixed in with governance issues and conflict, and especially in Africa, where you've seen both a series of coups recently. 2023 has been the year of coups in especially the Sahel in Africa. There are still areas of serious conflict, South Sudan, on and off, Sudan, Congo, and others, Cameroon, where people are still leaving from conflict zones. Parts Ethiopia, Tigray. I mean, there's a number of things. And then there's climate change. It's an area that both has had historical political instability, that has maybe weak state formation, but you're also seeing a change in livelihoods, in the area where that is, mostly getting drier over time, and where people who are involved in agriculture are discovering, it's still very agricultural societies in many countries, are discovering that they're not able to make the same livelihood they could before. They may not call it climate change, but in the end, that's underneath a lot of the questions, and conflict over resources like water.
So we were talking about the Middle East. Can you zoom out and give us a sense of what's happening in immigration?
I mean, there's so much going on in the Middle East, right? I mean, the Middle East is one of the biggest draws right now in the Gulf states for migrant workers, and certainly Israel has been to a lesser extent as well. And then you have one of the biggest displacement crises in the world with Syria, and a less remembered one, but a really important one in Yemen as well. And so there's a lot going on. And of course, Palestinians, who are in every country in the Middle East. And you have 6 to 7 million Syrians outside their country, probably a little over 7 million now, actually, mostly still in the region. There's 1 million or a little more elsewhere in the world.
And so let's focus on the Gulf states. I mean, there's lots of migrant workers there, as you just mentioned, but also from, across Asia. I mean, there's lots of Asian migrant workers that are still in the Gulf states, for example, with the World Cup. Give us a sense of what's happening there.
I mean, we forget about it. We think that everyone is headed to Europe and North America. In reality, the Gulf states are a big a draw right now for many people, especially in Asia and increasingly in Africa, right, as well as other countries in the Middle East. I mean, the Gulf states are where people go. And the Gulf attracts both high-skilled workers, but also middle-skilled and lower-skilled workers, millions and millions of them. It is a way out of poverty for lots of people. We tend to hear about the human rights abuses. We tend to hear about the people who are cheated out of their wages, about the tough labor conditions, all of which are true and all which happen. But for many people, it is a way out of poverty, and people take short-term labor contracts, and short-term can be several years in some cases. But what's happened in North Africa that's interesting is increasingly there are also the gateways for people from sub-Saharan Africa who are trying to reach Europe. And so they've gone from being countries that were primarily migrant-sending countries, sources of migration elsewhere, to countries that are transit points where people are trying to, get to Europe. But they're also becoming destinations. Many sub-Saharan migrants, by the time they get to North Africa, maybe they want to go to Europe eventually, but they settle down in North Africa. They have opportunities in countries there like Tunisia and Morocco that they might not have had in their own countries. And so they're also becoming destination countries.
Immigration is a global issue, and today we took a look at immigration issues in Africa and the Middle East. To learn more about this, as well as many other immigration-related topics, follow us on social media at Immigrant Food. Sign up for our weekly newsletter, where each week we send you 5 ways that you can make a difference. And join us in the Immigrant Food restaurants to stay #United at the Table. See you guys next month for a different issue.